Welcome to Personal, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I'm your host, Charlotte Nichols, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Bray. Chris is Chief Executive at Newcastle Cat and Dog Shelter. Why are animals so special to you?
I think they've always been part of my life. From a very young age, I've had pets, mostly dogs to be fair, but they are just intrinsically linked with my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Are there any special memories about certain pets?
So I guess when I was very young, we did start with the goldfish. It outlived what it should have done. I think it went on for about 6 or 7 years. So there was the goldfish. Then we moved on to the retriever, the Puff, the retriever, who was probably my best friend for many, many years. Her sleeping arrangements were in our kitchen. There was a cupboard where you probably should have had pots and pans, but that's where Puff was. And if I was having a tough time, I would be in the cupboard with Puff quite regularly. So That's a really fun memory of Puff, the golden retriever, and me through my early years.
How old were you?
So Puff arrived when I was very young, and she lived a long age. For a retriever, she was about 11 or 12 when she died. So she was a big part of most of my young years.
And did you feel like she really understood you?
Oh, always. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think people who don't own animals can struggle to comprehend that, but emotionally, they're on a higher level, I feel, than we are.
Without doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Very good communicators.
Yeah. Do you experience that quite a lot in working with animals on a day-to-day basis?
Very much so, yeah. I just think there's a anomaly that people think purely because an animal can't speak, that it's not communicating, but I would argue differently. I think they're always communicating, just not speaking, I guess.
Yeah, I think they can communicate on a higher level through different senses that we're even aware of.
100%.
Yeah. Do you have any heartwarming stories of pets that have been adopted, rehomed, and changed the owners' lives?
That's happening all the time, in fairness. I mean, we get a lot of correspondence around the transformational change that an animal has. I think people have got to want to have a bit of that, if I'm honest. You can't force it either necessarily.
That's true.
However, my experience and the experience of the people that I speak to is all around, they can't imagine a life without that animal. It's not always a marriage in heaven either. There are times when it's quite difficult, but that's life, isn't it? I think
absolutely.
There has to be an investment in time. They're not a flick of a switch. I think the modern world that we live in now, we expect instant response and instant. That doesn't happen. I think if you invest and are prepared to listen to your pet, whatever your pet is, what you get back is unbelievable. There's a lot of stuff around COVID and pets as well that maybe I can allude to, but the transformational impact of a pet during COVID is generalisations. Person living on their own with a pet got through pandemic much, much better than a person living on their own without a pet. The power of the pet.
Absolutely. I used to work for a charity called WAG, which was all about using dogs to prevent loneliness, particularly in the elderly. And there was stats on frailty, similar. If you had a pet, you felt you were less frail. Yeah. And a lot of it came from that preventing loneliness.
They're an amazing charity. They're coming in this week as well to have a chat, but brilliant.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, WAG & Co.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. And when people are looking for their pets at the shelter, do they choose the pet or does the pet choose them? And when I say pet, cat or dog?
Yeah. I personally think the pet picks them. People might view it differently, but there's always a connection, I think. It can be a tail wag or an eye movement or a bark. There's something that compels that person. I think people come in with a kind of a plan of what animal they might want, and that isn't always what happens necessarily. It can be as simple as a dog barking that draws them in or whatever. So again, that communication thing that goes on.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the animal picking the person.
I think so. I like to think so anyway. And I love it that you have dogs and cats, because quite often it's dogs versus cats. So, are you a dog person? Are you a cat person? But you have both, which is brilliant.
Yeah, we do. And I think there are people that are dog people, and there are definitely cat people as well. And there are some sort of characteristics that would maybe shape a cat person versus a dog person.
Can we discuss what are the characteristics?
Gosh,
this might be controversial.
Into all sorts of challenging spaces.
Stereotypically.
I mean, if you think of a dog, again, generalising, dogs tend to love everything and everybody. They wag their tail. As long as you feed them and play with them, you've got a friend.
Quite simple creatures, aren't they?
Pretty much. Yeah. Cats are maybe different, I guess, in terms of their behaviours. they're not like a dog ultimately, and they behave differently because of that. And therefore, I think cat people have a different relationship with their pet. I think cat lovers have a different way of investing their time and expect very little back. So that bond and that relationship with a cat person is very different and probably deeper, I guess, in a different way. Whereas the dogs, they live in moments. They're just happy to be, like, as long as they're being fed, ultimately they're your friend. Cats are very different in that context, I guess.
Yes, and controversial question. If you had to say you're a dog or a cat person, which one would you say?
I don't think there is an answer to that, if I'm honest. I mean, I have a dog. I have Nellie, the puppy. I love cats very much, so I don't think I do. I think they're just different creatures with different characteristics, and so I don't think, and I wouldn't be allowed really. But honestly, I think my lifestyle currently, a dog makes a lot of sense. But I certainly looking forward to getting a cat as well at some stage.
Mm-hmm. I was actually very much a cat person growing up. In my younger years, went through about 7 different cats, and some of them rescues, and just had no luck. And then discovered dogs. Okay. Again, got a rescue. Okay. And I'd say I'm probably more a dog person now, but whenever anyone says that, they think, oh, well, you're definitely not a cat person. And it doesn't mean I'm not a cat person. I still love cats too. If anything, my mum's seriously allergic to cats. Okay. So that prevents us ever having one. And I'm mildly allergic.
Okay, yeah.
But, yeah.
I think you can only change through time as well, don't you? A circumstance. Yes. I mean, people that I meet that don't like dogs may have been bitten by a dog in a youth. So, there's always a reason underpinning, I think, why somebody might like a dog or cat, or people that just love animals, I guess.
Yeah. And how heartbreaking is it at the shelter when there's certain dogs and cats that no one wants to rehome?
It truly isn't heartbreaking because of the fact that we're so good at what we do. That animal is loved. That animal is cared for.
That's good to know.
We do have animals that stay longer than we'd like them to. It tends to be a dog that's a bigger dog, or maybe it's a cat that's slightly older, and maybe a black cat. People don't like black cats because they're bad luck, they don't photograph very well or whatever.
I don't like the fact that people just are so superstitious still.
Yeah, there is that, definitely. But because of the shelter's environment, we look after the animals in our care incredibly. The staff, the volunteers, we're passionate about what we do. And I know people perceive that there is a sadness to the shelter. I've been at the shelter for 3 years. I've never experienced that. We love our animals. They are really well looked after. They're with us relatively briefly, the majority of them. And those that hang around a little longer, we build a bond with them. So, and we do find every animal a home. We're really good at that bit.
That's good to know. And obviously, there's the rumour that if they stick around so long, they get put down. Is that true?
Not true at all. Okay. No, not true. There'll only ever be a real, genuine reason why we would put to sleep an animal, and that would be based on a medical condition where there's no treatment, or it's there are issues around that treatment, or there's severe behavioural issues where we could not safely put that animal back into the community. But those situations are thankfully really rare these days. So
that's good to know. And there's almost a kindness to that we're more kinder to animals than we are to humans. So we'll let humans suffer, whereas we don't want to see our dogs and cats suffer.
That's very true. I think an example of that is somebody living on the streets. They tend to feed their pet better food than they feed themselves. That's most humans are very kind towards our animals. I think partly because they need us ultimately for lots of things. So, but yeah, I see that a lot actually. The kind of genuine love and affinity and affection for animals in my day to day.
Oh, that must be so lovely. But there are still humans that aren't that compassionate towards pets.
There's a few. There's not many. It can happen, but that's life, isn't it? There are people out there that either don't like animals or have a fear of animals or whatever. There are some animals out there that are not great with humans. So it happens, but it's very few instances. They tend to get a lot of publicity these days, unfortunately. Obviously, the XL bully ban at the moment that's happening has had a big impact, but it's part of having animals. Ultimately, there are always going to be sometimes situations where things happen, unfortunately, but it's very rare.
Yeah, there does seem to be certain breeds that are discriminated against, particularly in dogs.
Yeah.
It does seem quite unfair.
It's very unfair. It's politically driven, I suspect. But there are certain breeds. Well, the XL bully is a good example. There's pit bulls and others that get a real bad press. Most of the dogs that we meet that are breeds like that, like the XL Bully, are some of the best dogs I've ever met. So it's all to do with the owner, ultimately, I think.
Interesting. So what are the powers of animals?
Gosh, I'm going to sound a bit strange. I mean, I genuinely feel they're incredible at what they do in terms of situational stuff. So having an animal in a room, if you've got a room without an animal versus a room with an animal, you won't realise it, but they immediately start to make you more relaxed. They're a slight distraction to situations. And in my mind, they're very much a glue in a family environment. An animal, a pet, are usually the reason why you all gather together. So that dog, that cat, whatever that pet might be, they're having a relationship with all of you independently, but collectively as a family as well. So, in the modern world that we live in, where there's tech and there's, lots of things to distract us, the pet is still crucial and really important without being able to speak, as we've said. But just that ability to be present is really special.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's almost like, how do they calm you down? How do they create that really relaxed vibe in a room?
Well, I think there's probably some science that goes behind that. But the reality is, because they are living in their moments, you just live your moment too. It's hard to be thinking of much else when you're stroking the dog, to be fair. I mean, you might have the weight of on the world of you on your shoulders, but you're patting a dog, so you just become present. So I think they have that ability to take you away from your day-to-day sometimes. It's the thing about having a bad day at work. You go home, if there's a dog wagging its tail at you, you quickly forget what you've had experienced during your day. So I don't know how they do it, if I'm honest, but they definitely do it. If you embrace it, I guess, in that context.
Oh, I totally agree. And just that feeling of them being close to you, the cuddling.
The warmth.
The warmth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they do help people with learning difficulties, people going through mental trauma. They can help heal people.
Yeah, there's a lot of work in America with children, that SEN children, that struggle to read in a classroom environment. So they've been taking children to read in front of dogs in kennels. So the dog doesn't mind that the child is stood in front of them, if they're like children, that is, and therefore the child can read to the dog, build up some confidence, go back into the classroom and speak more confidently in front of their peer group. So we're looking at things like that going forward about, yes, our priority is to rehome animals and we're good at it. What else could we do? So we're looking at that alongside the volunteering stuff that we're doing as well at the moment. So a lot of volunteers in terms of mental health, just being close to an animal can change your mindset. So lots of different things that we're doing, but the power of the animal, most definitely.
Yeah, and they can even sniff out someone who's going to have an epileptic fit, people who might have a seizure. They can detect changes in brain activity.
Yeah.
They're so intelligent.
I think they're also the one around bereavement, so they can detect when you're sad if you've lost somebody. So the cat that's not overly friendly necessarily will work out when an owner needs some comfort. And there was a story recently where somebody said, my cat, almost feral, rarely in the house. When I lost somebody close to me, I had 2 days of the cat being with me. Only 2 days, but it was enough for that person to have that connection. And when the cat realised that the person was coming through their grief, that was off again. But the cat made that decision to be close. So that, again, you can say but it happens a lot.
Yeah, I believe that. And I heard something that cats see in energy rather than in light, how we see it.
My belief is it's around your vibrations.
Okay.
So they pick up on, so if you're nervous or if you're angry, your state, your vibration state impacts on them. So they struggle sometimes with somebody that is anxious or can pick up on that. So whereas if you're very relaxed and very comfortable, they're more likely to be much more warmer and keen to engage with you.
Okay.
I feel.
Same for dogs as well. Yeah. I guess that I was always brought up on, if you see a dog, this was back when you're little and, people are worried that you're going to run up to a big dog. They can detect that fear in you.
Yeah.
Which I guess is all that sensing the emotional vibration.
I think we're always, I believe we're vibrating all the time. And I think animals pick up on how we are vibrating, I think, in that context, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Now, have you ever had backlash? Obviously, you're out there to rehome cats and dogs. There's a lot of news at the minute about how many, I think it's hundreds of thousands of people are homeless in the UK alone. Do you ever get that backlash of, why should we be rehoming a dog or cat when there's hundreds of thousands of people that need a home? In
fairness, no, I don't think I've ever kind of come across. I believe there will be people out there that would have that view, and there's not everyone that loves animals. So I think my response ultimately around that is there are a lot of people driving fast cars or going on exotic holidays. People live their lives. Animals are part of that society. You could always question and challenge whether we should be spending money on rehoming dogs and cats and other animals. But I guess what would the alternative be if we didn't exist? I guess, the animals would go somewhere ultimately. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's quite an extreme view for somebody to feel that way, but I've not come across it myself.
Yeah, I don't believe that way. I don't feel that way. But it's just often, having worked with animal charities in the past, sometimes I've had the response of, but there's people that have more deserving causes than the animals. So it's just always an interesting one.
Yeah, again, I think that's, thankfully, we live in quite a broad church of a community, so that people make the choices, don't they? I think that's probably why we exist, because the community support good groups like ours, like they do other organisations, I guess. But thankfully, and it isn't easy running charities at the moment in the cost of living crisis, but we're able to generate enough funds to carry out the work that we do, which I believe is really important. So grateful that we can.
Have you seen an influx of dogs and cats since the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, so it's not been an avalanche, thankfully, but you never like to say it because I get told off if I do. But the truth is, no. There's an increased prevalence, definitely, and there is an increase in the numbers of dogs and cats that are not very well. So that can be a vet bill that's come across a family that they can't afford the vet bill, they're not insured. So not only do we get the animal, we get the vet bill. But that's why we're there. So that's what we do. But the increasing numbers of those has definitely sort of spiked, I would say. And I think the community are finding it hard. Pet food has doubled in price. And it isn't always the vet cost. It might be a car cost. An unexpected cost comes into your family. You're struggling already. You've got 2 dogs or you've got 3 cats or whatever you've got, and you've noticed the cost has gone up, and then the car bill comes in. Or the heating bill. So you've got the radiator one side, you've got the dog the other side. What are you going to do? People are having to make some really, really tough choices. I think from my perspective, the sadness that comes with that is I genuinely believe that animals are essentials in families, but because of the way we are living our lives, they're now considered luxuries. And that's quite scary to think that an animal is no longer an essential item because of cost. It's become a luxury and an item for the wealthy rather than for everybody. So that's a real shame. If that's where we're moving as a society, that's really upsetting, I think, because they're so important in families.
That is a real shame. And do you ever think that sometimes they're used as social media material?
There's a cohort of that, I think, as with everything, again. But, there's a lot of sort of, the guy that got very successful stroking his cat, I think he had 200,000 followers within a few days. Animals are definitely used on social media, rightly or wrongly. But that'll always be the way, I think. A lot of people like watching animal content as well, so there are some benefits to it as well. So.
And a lot of people share their content for the love of them.
They do. And I think, again, on social, if you've got extended family or family living abroad, what better way to sort of share the image of your pet than through social? So it happens a lot.
And how heartbreaking is it when someone has to give their loved pet to you because they can't afford to keep them?
It truly is devastating. So I do sit in on some of those times when a person comes in and gives up their pet, and it's really hard. I mean, the reassurance that we can provide that person in that time is that we will do everything and look after that animal for them and find them an amazing home. But it's truly heartbreaking. I find it, I'm not unemotional, and I find that very difficult when somebody, and you can tell the love that a person has or a family has. So we know that's not an easy decision. We never judge either. So that's just, but some of the stories and some of the situations are truly, truly heartbreaking.
Is that the hardest part of your job?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for my team as well, it never gets easier. And I think if it did, that would be the concern. If that became normal, it's not. So, and the bravery in which people give up a pet, that they truly love, and you can tell that it's really hard.
Because they want a better life for it, ultimately.
Well, that's what's happening, absolutely. And you can, absolutely, yeah. Oh. So we take that responsibility very seriously as well. So we will always clearly endeavour to then, knowing as much as we know about that particular animal, we'll piece that together, and our rehoming team will find somewhere amazing for that animal to go.
I don't think I could handle that on a daily basis.
No, it's not easy.
Oh, and what can what can we learn from animals? We talk about quite a lot of toxic behaviours now as humans, and that's an extreme, but still, even just our busyness and our not living in the presence. What can we learn from animals and how they behave and interact?
Yeah. So I think we could do a lot more of talking less. So obviously animals don't talk; they communicate other ways. I think we talk too much as humans. I think there's a lot of power in talking less. There's a real value to that. I think sometimes we think we need to talk. I think it's like when you're with good friends or good company, you sometimes talk less because you're just enjoying being together. I think that's something that animals are probably telling us to do. We talk a lot, right?
That's a really good point. Actually, when I think of any of my really close friendships and family, we can just sit there and not say anything. There's no pressure to keep that conversation flowing and almost create noise.
I think there's some power to that, I think.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Do you think we just like the sound of our own voice? Or?
I think society's moving in that way that we feel the need to talk. Whereas, that's a personal view, but I do feel talking less is something that I've become since being involved with the shelter. I'm more mindful. My team might not say that, to be fair. I do talk quite a lot, but I'm very aware of sometimes going quiet and listening rather than always feeling the need to feel the quiet, I guess.
Definitely. And there's that listening to respond where you're not really listening because you're thinking about what you're going to say and how that's going to be perceived and try and seem intelligent, and versus listening to truly kind of understand.
Yeah, the active side of stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, that's a really good point. And what can animals teach us about our own kind of, toxic behaviours in terms of, say, well, obviously animals can't use phones and you could be on social media. But do you think, again, it's about that being present, that day-to-day, just being in the moment?
The living in the now. I mean, I'm not great with my phone in terms of it's not as important as it is to some. But I think just putting your phone away, I mean, and you see again with when you're with a dog or a cat, you don't need to film it, just be it, just enjoy it. I think we need to do, the phone is important, of course it is. And I think I'm in that generation that I never had one when I was young anyway, so I'm still learning to use the thing. But I know it's not that important to me. Whereas I think the younger generation, my son's 13, he's grown up with a phone being quite normalised. So and that's okay, it's not a criticism, but I'm still a big believer that the phone is not as important as we think it is. I think there are other things that we can enjoy. I think the power, again, of an animal versus the phone, I know which one, if I had to choose, I know which one I'm having, and it isn't the phone.
So many people would choose phones these days.
And that's cool. But then I guess spin that forward and think, in terms of things like mental health or whatever, is the phone the solution? Maybe there's some research that could be done, but I suspect that the animal has possibly more advantages than the phone, I guess. Or maybe there's a balance, isn't there?
Like anything.
Less phone, more animal.
Yeah, no, I agree. And let's talk about the power of now. And, animals do live in that moment. How do you try and live in the moment?
Yeah, so all the time I do think about things as simple as breathing and my breath. I am very mindful that the temptation in the modern world is to, get to places like I've got here today in a bit of a hurry, but I definitely try and pause, reflect, enjoy very simple things. So I've got better at it over time. I'm still not there yet, but very mindful of just the simple things, and, little things like, and it will sound quite sad, I guess, in terms of activity, washing up. I wash up once a day. And I don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of washing up, but sometimes just thinking I'm alive, I'm well, I'm just going to enjoy washing up for 5 minutes and stuff like that. So spinning my life a little bit differently to probably how I was certainly before being involved in animal welfare. I'm much more mindful and much more content with the things that I've got and the simple things, I guess. Yeah,
I think it was Johnny Wilkinson that said that doing the washing up was just as important as kicking tries in the World Cup.
I hadn't heard that quote, but that doesn't surprise me. You can not enjoy something, but if you step back and think, I'm going to enjoy this, change your mindset, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And just everything deserves the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you spiritual?
I'm not sure if I am or I'm not. I believe there's something out there, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. But I don't know if that makes me spiritual.
Do you build any mindful or spiritual practices into your day-to-day life?
Well, certainly I meditate quite a lot, and breathing is really important to me. I do practice some yoga, but not as much as I'd like. But yeah, I am very much into finding time for me that isn't anything other than relaxation and meditation, definitely.
When do you do your meditations?
All the time, in terms of I've got a weird thing where I look at my hands quite regularly just to sort of base myself. I've got a tapping thing that I can do occasionally just to relax myself. I do a mantra, which is, so I live in a village where I'm 5 minutes from a sort of a motorway, and in that 5 minutes on my drive I check in every morning with myself in terms of what day I've had previously, how I'm feeling, how much I've slept. So I'm regularly checking in and just making sure that I'm okay. If after 2 or 3 days something isn't great, I haven't slept well or whatever, then I can start to understand that a bit better. So I'm constantly just reviewing and reflecting about me and my life and if I'm okay. And that's helpful to me. And it's become a daily exercise that I do. And it has real benefit to me in terms of how I manage my life. And that check-in opportunity is really crucial.
Oh, absolutely. And was there a certain moment that triggered that to start happening?
Yeah, I think somebody told me, a wise person once told me a long time ago, that you judge other people by their actions, but you judge your own behaviour by your intentions. So you're sometimes a lot easier on yourself than you are of others. But if you start judging yourself by your actions rather than your intentions, it changes things. And it has for me. So rather than that, I'm definitely going to do that tomorrow, I didn't do it today, you actually kind of own up to a lot of your things that you're not doing, even though you intend to do them. That's massively helped me. And I think that's why I've started to change my relationship with myself through wise words like those.
They are wise. I love that. That's really insightful. And have you read any books recently that have kind of given you more of a, mindful or spiritual awareness?
I don't read as much as I'd like to. Reading usually for me is an escapism rather than, I'm not into the books that are out there at the moment. There's a lot of them that come through the system. So I don't read it in the traditional sense of like the scholars that are out there necessarily, particularly. But I think I get more learning for me in terms of talking to other people about their journeys or their experiences and things, rather than the need to fill up my cup in terms of that level of reading.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask, was there a book that had a particularly profound impact on you, but it doesn't have to be a book, or any wisdom that anyone else has passed on to you? Yeah,
I was thinking this. I did, when I was young and travelling the world or whatever, pre-university, I read the book by, I pronounce his name wrong, Albert Lutuli, who was pre-Nelson Mandela, and it's a book called Let My People Go. And it was quite profound in terms of his journey and the impact that he'd made. And that definitely had an impact on me in terms of living a life and making positive change. So that was over 30 years ago, because I'm really old now. But I still remember reading that book and the impact that it had on me in terms of one person's impact, definitely.
Yeah, and talking about impact, the impact of people, obviously our parents have a huge impact on us, either negative or positive as we grow up. How did losing your parents affect your life?
Yeah, this is why I try not to get emotional, I guess, because I lost Mum when I was quite young. It feels quite young. Mum died at the age of 67, but had dementia. In fact, Mum had memory issues all through her life. So when I was young, Mum struggled with memory. So it wasn't recognised as dementia, but Mum, from about the age of 50, was really quite poorly.
So young.
And at 60 had her diagnosis, but and then passed away at 67. So, that was rubbish, I'm not going to lie. And I lost my dad a few years ago, but Dad was in his sort of late 70s, so that's a bit more kind of easy to deal with, I guess, in terms of people not living forever. But I felt a little bit, I still feel with... Luckily, a lot of my friendship groups have parents still very much alive and very well. And I sometimes miss that, knowing if they'd still been here and been well, the opportunities and the love that would still be around. So I do find that hard sometimes. But, I was lucky to have really good parents. So, I was grateful for the time that I had with my mum. Just wish I'd had it for a little longer than I did.
Yeah, and it seems so cruel to lose your memories, because sometimes we are defined by our memories.
It's an awful thing. Yeah, absolutely. I still struggle with that concept of being with Mum, and particularly when my son, now 13, met Mum, and he met her twice when he was very young. she didn't really understand, and that was quite tough to sort of to manage. But she would have loved, and if she'd still been around, the love that Mum would have given my little boy would have been incredible. But it is what it is. So, but it's not easy sometimes.
No, and it's something that I don't know. Society is almost like, well, we are going to die. Ideally, your parents die before you. It shouldn't be that hard, but it still is so hard.
I think it should be hard, actually. I think death is hard. I think, when you love people and they go, that can't not have an impact, I think. Whatever age that is, friends that have got parents into their 90s now, but they're still your parents. They're still people that you've lived with all your life. So whenever they leave, I think it's really hard. It's the conversations that you can no longer have. I think, there are songs out there that embrace that, but it's true. Sometimes I just want to pick up the phone and have a little chat with Dad about something silly, but I can't. So, but it's that. Sometimes it hits you quite hard. Father's Day, obviously, on Sunday, they're quite rubbish days, aren't they, really? But then you celebrate what you had rather than what you don't. So there's always a different way of doing it, I think.
And reframing it. And
yeah, absolutely.
What conversations do you wish you could have with them if they were alive now?
I still chat to them most days, to be fair.
Oh.
I mean, when my mum died, the day Mum died, there was a rainbow. And I wasn't particularly into rainbows prior to that, but it was a very pertinent rainbow. And then on the day that that Dad's funeral was, there was another big rainbow. So they feature quite prominently. So usually when I see a rainbow, I'll have a chat with Mum or Dad. And I, not today, but when I'm driving, Mum's usually sat with me and I'll have a little chat with Mum. So I regularly talk to them. Yeah.
Do you feel they're there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're keeping an eye on things, and they're they keep me in check. They're still there to tell me off. But they're also there for me just to have a little chat about something. If it's been an experience or something good's happened or something challenging's happened, I still refer back and have a little chat with Mum. Mum more than Dad. Dad wasn't great at listening. Mum was a good listener, so she's an easy one to talk to. But yeah, still enjoy conversations with Mum. So
do you almost feel they're like your guardian angels now?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, so my son, who's never really met my mum, knows Mum really well because she's been talked about all through his life. So he's aware of Nanny Mary and he talks about her fondly. So, and yeah, they're definitely around somewhere. I'm not quite sure where. Yeah. I'm not sure if they're here, but they keep an eye on me.
They might be.
Definitely. Yeah.
I grew up believing, for various reasons, that my grandfather, who died when I was 3, was my guardian angel.
Okay. All right.
I can't even remember some of the signs, but definitely had that strong feeling that he was always there. And again, that giving advice on a deeper spiritual kind of plane. So I do believe in that. Have you ever got involved with a spiritual medium or tarot card reader?
No, not yet.
No,
not to say that I wouldn't, but no, not yet.
And if you could relive one moment with them again, what would that be?
I just genuinely like. I think there's lots of things, but just quality time with each other, just being away when I was young, particularly, and being on a family holiday. They were incredible. I've got an slightly older sister, so the 4 of us and the dog. We had so many special times as a family. So just to go back and relive those would be fab. Yeah.
And what do you think happens when you die?
Good question. I mean, I don't think about it very often, if I'm honest. I'm quite relaxed about the concept. I mean, a lot of people have done it already, and I'm not frightened of it in that context. I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm looking forward to it in that sense, but I'm certainly not. I'm not that worried about it. That's not something that bothers me. I know it bothers a lot of people, but for me, I guess I worked in a hospice for 5 years, 6 years, so I saw death quite a lot, and it's never really something that's bothered me or concerned me. I find it quite a cathartic thing, and lots of people do it. So
that's true. Do you think that humans and dogs and cats all have the same soul?
Again, I don't know. There's some connectivity. I don't know what it is. There's something, but I don't know what that is. So pass, I think, on that one.
I know they're tricky questions for you, Chris.
Yeah, they are.
I was expecting the answers.
Yeah, sorry. I can't answer that one.
We'll move on.
Next time.
Move on. Well, another kind of just quite shallow question. What were you put on this earth to accomplish?
Yeah. Do you know what? I think I'm just want to make a positive difference, however that might be. If that's just a smile to somebody or a hug or to develop one of my team or to be developed. I think it's a set of experiences which I think can and need to be mostly kind and considerate to others. That's what I think I'm here for. Whether I do that well or not, I don't know, but that's what I believe I'm here to do.
And how did you discover your purpose?
I think I'm still discovering it, in truth. I think, I mean, I love what I do. I absolutely, like, there isn't a moment where I don't wake up and can't wait to get to work, wherever that work might be. So I think it's a case of using the skills that you've got and being in the environment that you can give the most back. And I think, certainly with this job, I think I've found that.
Oh, and that's so rare that people just can't wait to get to work. You started your employment in the corporate sector and you found that wasn't the case.
Yeah, so my first job out of university was in a commercial setting. It involved ringing a bell every time you got a big sale. And I realised very early on in the first 6 months that ringing the bell meant nothing to me. Everyone around me was really excited, and it meant that you got a bonus or whatever, and you could buy a car or whatever. And it just, the whole concept of that was just, it just didn't excite me. And I knew quite early on that that wasn't quite for me. I'm still in touch with quite a few of the people that still do that and did that back then. But I already instinctively knew that that wasn't my journey. So thankfully, I only lasted less than a year in that role before moving into the not-for-profit and then the third sector.
And no looking back?
No, none, not at all.
What is it that appeals to you about the charity sector?
You can just make a difference every day. Mm-hmm. You know, you might not be as wealthy as some of, and I'm not compared to some of my contemporaries, but the truth be told that my happiest friends have no money. So I don't view wealth as being important. I know it is, and increasingly for me, I mean, I'm divorced and I live on my own. So, you know, money's important, of course it is, but as a driver, not at all. You know, I'd be happy poor than sad wealthy. I think I'd be a very sad wealthy person. So, and I don't see wealth in financial terms anyway. So.
That's a really good point. But do you see money as quite an unhealthy thing?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it's not always. I see lots of people living lives with money and being successful and happy. So I think it varies depending on people and circumstances and whatever else. But for me, it's, the simple things in life are usually fairly free or cheap, I think. But the world that we live in encourages us to think about our money situation.
It does, and it just seems so out of balance because the jobs that, you know, involve caring, nurturing, looking after people or animals, they're often the most poorest paid.
So I think that's true, and it is true, but that, again, I think we can confuse sometimes wealth and how we determine what wealth looks like, so, and happiness and stuff like that. I think there's a level that people need, but I think the happiest people that I know definitely are not the wealthiest people that I know. And the wealthiest people I know are some of the most unhappy people I know. And that's not always true. No. There are outliers on both ways. I have very poor, miserable friends, and I have very happy, wealthy friends. Yeah. So it's not conjoined. But I do, for me personally, money's really important. It very much is important, but it doesn't make the decisions around how I work or where I work, for example. I think if I'd wanted to be wealthy, I would not have ended up in the sector that I've worked in my whole life. So... But it's still important, very important.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're paid in loads of, fulfillment and happiness instead of that money.
Yeah. And you do. I think people that work in the third sector or in care, not everybody, again, generalisations, but for a lot of people that work in the third, we do it because we love what we do and it means something. It's, how hard I work and the impact that I make directly improves the lives of the animals that are in my care. So that's the satisfaction that somebody that works in a car showroom won't get to the same extent. I definitely feel it benefits my mental health to know that I've made a difference. So, that definitely drives me. It's difficult to be lazy around the job that I do in terms of justifying my laziness to Sebastian, the dog that's currently in our care. How do I tell Sebastian I can't be bothered to get up this morning? Yes. He wouldn't be happy with that. So,
no, he wouldn't. No.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you need money to keep the dogs and cats happy too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cost of living, I think, has made it more difficult for so many people, and that's really hard. That's when the reality kicks in that you need to survive in this difficult world, you need a level of money that You see it more and more, and it's tougher and tougher, definitely, without doubt.
Yeah, and has the competition for money and donations between charities, has that really increased and got quite competitive?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say at this point because, I'm from a national charity background, so I know how they work. They're ruthless, they're very clever, they have big budgets, big deep pockets. They're very good, particularly at digital fundraising and storytelling, but they have lots of people doing it. So we are small, but we're vital. If it carries on the way it's carrying on, you'll be left with a lot less local good causes and a lot bigger national organisations, and I'm not convinced that's great, but that's where we're heading, I think.
So what can people do to support their local smaller charities?
So in lots of different ways. I mean, we have obviously a volunteer programme at the shelter, so that's great. That's one way. Small but regular donations, so that's a regular gift. So that's on our charity. It's very easy to do. Set up a direct debit and give us a small amount but regular amount. We have a lottery now that we've only introduced fairly recently, but again, chance to win some money, but chance to give to the shelter. We have shops, and we're going to grow some of our shops so you can donate. There's so many different ways in which you can pay back to a smaller organisation. I always believe local is better than national. National charities are great, don't get me wrong, they do amazing things, but they probably should be funded in different ways to the local communities, I think.
That's just what you believe, yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you for that. We are breaking one of our podcast rules there, but because you're a charity, it's good to promote. So that's totally great. No, don't be sorry. I asked the question and I wanted to give you that opportunity. So thank you so much for all your answers so far. We're now on to our regular questions part of the podcast, where it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, you have to rate yourself.
Hilarious. Right.
It's just a bit of fun. Number 1, how good looking are you?
2.
How funny are you?
5, sometimes funny, sometimes very not funny.
How good at cooking are you?
I'm going to go 8 or 9. I love cooking.
Brilliant. How good at singing are you?
2, if not 1. Do you have negatives? Low.
Do you drink alcohol?
Almost not at all.
Yeah?
Very little.
So you've got a low tolerance if you do? Or
yeah,
no?
Well, I don't particularly enjoy alcohol, to be fair, but I will occasionally have a drink. So, but not a big drinker. So,
More and more people are saying that. I think more and more people are just becoming aware of all the negative side of alcohol.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, your score though for that bit?
What was the
1 to 10 alcohol drinking?
Oh,
tolerance.
2. Yeah, not bothered. Yeah.
Parenting?
Yeah, 8 or 9. I believe I'm the best that I can be, but I'm a good parent. Yeah.
Brilliant. How good a friend are you?
Yeah, 8 or 9. I've got good friends and have good friends. Yeah.
Excellent. Are you intelligent?
No, not really. No, 3 or 4.
Sounds harsh. How kind are you?
Yeah, I'm kind. I like to help and support people. So 7, 8 or 9, something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a low score from someone in the charity sector. And how good at sex are you?
A 10, definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris.